My house is about 1,000 feet of pure Brickyard Pond water from where they want to put the turbine. So along with the Lachance, if you look at the direct impact over water, Broadview Drive in this neighborhood here are the impacts. But if I look out and I stand outside my back door, I will see a 300-foot tower, and I will hear it 24 hours a day. The loudest thing I have in my neighborhood now that is a consistent blessing is a swan taking off when she has to get lift and actually hits the water with her wings. That is why we live on Brickyard Pond. That's why we live in this neighborhood, because it is peaceful and it is a sanctuary.
I went out and talked to people that live around the Portsmouth Abbey turbine, and I went up to Hull and I talked to people that live around the 2 turbines in Hull. And the people that live 500 and 600 feet away from the turbine in Portsmouth hate it. It's noisy. One couple had to move their bedroom from the back of the house to the front of the house to try and get away from the noise. A house that's 850 feet away from the Portsmouth turbine said they just don't want to sit out in their backyard anymore at night because of the constant noise.
The wind 250 to 300 feet up could be completely different than the wind 20 feet and below.
That is absolutely correct.
And when you're at a peaceful conservation area such as the Brickyard Pond area, you could be in still, calm area, no noise being generated, and the turbine is the loudest thing because at 300 feet the wind is blowing. And they can't show it without the 6 months to 12 months of a test and the noise that correlates to the speed of the wind during it. You can't have somebody go out with a decimal meter and say it's average X. It doesn't work that way. It's over time and it's graphed so you can correlate when what was the atmosphere doing and why was the wind what it was.
I know. And nobody can tell me that this thing being only 800 feet or 1,000 feet away from a resident, that you're not going to hear that noise emanating from that generator all the time.
That's right. And then the nice calm water acts as a reflective,
it's a
reflective surface. The angle of incidence that the sound hits it, it's going to bounce up at an opposite and equal angle. It's physics. It's a fact.
When you get different responses from people, and it is somewhat subjective. Some people don't mind the noise. My point is there are going to be people that do mind the noise, so why should we impose that on people? We should err on the side of comfort and safety for the residents.
I get frustrated when everybody calls it Legion Way, when they like to call it the Legion Way site, because when you look at where the Legion Way road ends, they're going into the peninsula onto what is a capped landfill that they haven't done any engineering on to say what's going to happen if they dig into it. It's in the middle of Brickyard Pond, and disturbing that to create the foundation for a turbine could damage the pond worse than anything. And they aren't accounting for that. For 50 years it's sat there capped, nobody touches it, and it's not damaging anything. Who knows what would happen if they drill into it.
When the rubber company went out of business in Barrington Center in the late 60s, all of their equipment, all of their waste rubber, it was a synthetic rubber plant, was put in that landfill. So they're going to go down through all that stuff, and it's all going to be released into the spring system that keeps that pond alive. And we surveyed that pond with URI for 4 years, and the pond is dying. I mean, there are lots of issues with that pond, and releasing those toxic materials from that landfill are definitely going to accelerate the death of that pond.
Right. Plus, it's a public park over there behind the Y. So, I mean, I was walking my dog back there this morning, in fact. So it's not just everyone who lives around here, but townspeople and, you know, the after-school programs and the summer YMCA camp programs and all the rest of it.
Well, and how many people use the bike path?
If you're building it on landfill with a high water table, how hard will it be to actually stabilize it? What environmental damage will you do?
This $2.4 million project doesn't take into account if you dig down 10 feet and you hit water. I mean, we already know there are tens of thousands of tons of cement that have to be put in there in order to stabilize these pieces of equipment. And there's a tremendous amount of fill that has to go in there too. So, you know, it seems ludicrous how you can proceed with a project like this without having the basis of some sound engineering study that will give you some impact as to you know, what the typography is, how deep you have to go, and what's going to be involved in it.
There's a lot of wildlife that I love on Brickyard Pond that I think will definitely be affected by this.
I'm against it because I think it will take away the dignity, sanctity of my neighborhood.
Barrington wouldn't allow a blue cow about this high, but yet we're going to put a 325-foot wind tower there, which is going to create all kinds of noise and disruption to the neighborhood. It's a very peaceful area. I don't think it's fair to the neighbors. I'm fairly far away, so I'm 1,500 feet plus. I'm not that close. But if you're right here, this is going to really destroy the quality of life why you came to Barrington. And for a small change in the cost of energy, it doesn't make sense.
As far as the economic model, the problem there is that the CREB isn't providing us. I've been asking, they'll hand you one sheet of paper and that will be the economic model, and it's lacking. It doesn't take into account things like the insurance figure. The maintenance number, I think, is very low. Transmission lines that are going to have to be put in, I don't think that's in the economic model. It's missing a lot, and we really haven't had somebody, an independent person, review the economic model. So people are walking around with the notion that this is going to bring in money to the town.
On the income side, they can't guarantee the wind's going to be there and when the cut-in is going to be. And you don't know what's going to happen with renewable energy credits. I can tell you that the state has just gone out and sold renewable energy credits. When you look at the state's pro formas, they assume zero of what they're going to get for those, because you can't count on, you can't count the chickens before they're hatched. They fool themselves in the report that they think they're going to help the environment because they're going to support and take load off of those generating plants. They're not. There are other solutions, geothermal, there are energy efficiency measures. I'd rather see a label on every one of our school buildings that says it met the Energy Star mandates, and that they've done work and spent our money on using less electricity than creating supply.
Does it make sense to borrow $2.1 million and to take $300,000 out of your rainy day fund on a project of dubious return? I say no. We may need that money for town services, and we may need that money in order to be able to maintain the schools.
It's kind of like, build it and then hope that it works. So it seems crazy to me.
Living in under 1,000 feet to the turbine, I am concerned about many things, but more importantly is the town of Barrington in the energy business. Thank you.
In summary, we'd like to add an appeal from those residents of Brickyard Pond who are unable to speak for themselves, and yet are in even greater danger from this project than anyone else. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has issued guidelines that clearly state that wind turbines should not be located in areas of large concentrations of birds or wetlands. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service would clearly be upset over this plan. DEM's official reports demonstrate that large numbers of waterfowl call this estuary home. Anyone who's ever walked or ridden on the bike path that passes right by Brickyard Pond can tell you that these elegant birds are quite often the reason that they stop to watch. We're placing these larger waterfowl in serious danger because we know that they land into the wind. Often that will take them through the spinning blades. True, they're not endangered, but does that give us the right to kill them?